Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our virtual breakfast for the week. My name is Christina Corral. I am the statewide cover crop and soil health educator, and I am housed out of Lake County. I'm happy to announce that Dr. Marisol Quintanilla will be talking about field crops, nematodes, and then after she's done, Dr. Andreessen will tell us the good news about our upcoming weather. So with that, Marisol, I'm going to stop sharing. If you want to share.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to talk to all of you. So I'm the nematologist at Michigan State University, and today I'm going to be talking about management of field crop nematodes with a special focus on soybean cyst nematode. And I have some information about beet cyst nematode, but I won't focus about that as much. For soybean cyst nematode, we have done quite a bit of research, including research on rotation of resistant varieties, cover crops, compost application, and currently ongoing, we are investigating the impact of manure and compost. We have a Michigan-wide survey, survey of different sites to check what kind of the quantity and distribution of soybean cyst nematode. And we're also trying to figure out the impact of wheat cultivation in the population of soybean cyst nematode. So soybean cyst nematode, here you can find the life cycle. We'll start with an egg. So an egg hatches and becomes juvenile. The juvenile worm enters the root. It sets up a feeding site. The cells become enlarged and joint. They become specialized to feed soybean cyst nematode, and the nematode becomes, especially the female, becomes sedentary. It stays in one place, becomes obese, and just feeds all her life pretty much in one spot, and the plant is giving it VIP treatment. Those cells are specially fed, and she lays eggs and outside of the root, but also dies full of eggs as a cyst. Those are the cysts. So the female dies full of eggs, and that cyst can persist for years, even for decades, without there being a host. Okay. They cause several symptoms. One of them is reduced yield. Okay. But many others. Mainly the problem is that it reduces yield, but it also makes the plant more susceptible to other pathogens. So the most effective management practice for soybean cyst nematode is to rotate with non-host. In other words, corn, wheat, etc. But wheat, especially a useful non-host. This has been observed by several people, several nematologists, and it has been published. And but any non-host, almost every crop except dry beans are non-host to soybean cyst nematode. Almost every major crop. So pretty much anything that you rotate soybeans with is a good option, except dry beans. So rotating soybeans with dry beans will not help you with soybean cyst nematode management. And another thing is using resistant varieties. The use of resistant varieties has really been a game changer. The only thing is that the same resistance, the same source of resistance has been used for more than 20 years. And the nematodes are breaking the resistance. Only the nematodes that are able to successfully reproduce in P8788 are able to succeed, because I think more than 90% of the soybeans grown in Michigan have the source of resistance P8788. So that is a lot of selection pressure forcing the nematodes to adapt to P. 788. And we did a trial of we did a trial that lasted 4 years, in which we rotated P. 788 with Peking. We had option. The treatments were P. 788 back to back, Peking back to back, or P. 788 rotated with Peking, or susceptible soybeans, either back to back. And that trial clearly showed that rotating P. 788 with Peking reduced soybean cyst nematode numbers and increase soybean yields. So rotating sources of resistance is the best option. When you grow Peking back to back, the first year, the second year, you can get good yields, but eventually those nematodes really become really adapted to Peking, and that yield goes down, and the nematode numbers go up, and really faster than it does with P. 788. Looks like Peking resistance does not hold up as well or as long. So Peking is a useful tool, a very useful tool, but don't replace P. 788 with Peking, but just use Peking in rotation. So when you grow soybean, you can do like 2 years of P. 788 and one of Peking. Of course, in between, you can grow non-host, but I would recommend using Peking, but not every year. All right, so we've also done cover crop trials. Mainly, every cover crops or crops are better than a susceptible soybean. So I'm not going to go into this. We've also gone into the different, evaluating different manures and their bacteria for management of soybean cyst nematode. And you can see here we extracted the exudate, and also we got the extract from different composts and manures. And you can see an interesting thing we observe is that certain high carbon composts, the less potent ones, the less stinky compost, like the dairy manure, or the ones that are like seed starter, like just composts that are high carbon and low lower in nitrogen compared to other composts, and less stinky. These composts really encourage hatching of soybean cyst nematode. They increase hatching more than the soybean root exudate. So it seems to us that it can be that compost can be used strategically. Let's say you're planting corn and you want to use a compost. You can use a high carbon, compost, and encourage soybean cyst nematode to hatch. And for them, it's a suicide mission, since there's no soybean planting. They can't feed on soybean, and they die. So when you're planting a non-host, certain composts can be useful because they encourage hatching. Chicken manure, the layer ash blend, which is one of the Morgan composting products, but layer manure, like chicken manure from any company, from composted or not composted, they all work well. They really prevent hatching, in part because the nematodes die. So these potent manures, the very spicy ones, stinky ones, high nitrogen ones, and they kill the nematodes. They prevent the hatching and they kill them, while some high carbon ones encourage them to hatch. So compost and manures can be used strategically to reduce your numbers. Okay, this is another trial. We've repeated this trial in several ways, and you can see that poultry manure really reduce nematode hatching and mainly killed the soybean cyst nematode eggs. And you can see, yeah, how effective they were to reduce that. Then this is another set of trials with with manures and checking the effect on soybean cyst nematode. And here you can see the same thing. You can see like high carbon compost, like this one that with this high carbon compost that we got from Colorado, because we did get compost from other states. And you can see here that it really encouraged hatching. But the poultry manure and layer manure is pretty much two different types of chicken manure, really discourage hatching and kill them. And even more than things that were it killed them. It killed them very effectively. Second trial again, you can see another trial. You can see the layer manure most effectively reduce hatching, while this Colorado compost, which is high carbon compost, encourage them hatching. So you can use this strategically. But to say this simply, spicy, stinky manures like chicken manure kill nematodes, while high carbon compost can help encourage them to hatch. So, which can be used strategically, encouraging them to hatch when you're planting a non-host. All right, so keep in mind that if you use 1 ton per acre, a ton and a quarter ton per acre, and 2 tons per acre, the concentration of manure is not high enough to kill all the nematodes. Okay, so it'll be a small portion, but it's still in most of our trials, even at a ton per acre, there is a significant reduction, but it's not going to eliminate your problem, but it can help.
Marisol, you have 3 minutes.
And what?
You have 3 minutes.
Oh boy. Okay, so we also did a survey. You can see a survey of different parts of the state with soybean cyst nematode. You can see Monroe County and Clinton County had the highest numbers of soybean cyst nematode in Michigan. We asked farmers how many years they've been planting soybeans and what kind of rotations they use, etc. The farmers that are planting P.I. 788 and Peking, this grade is 20%. I would say are the ones that have listened to our talk and are following the best way to reduce nematode numbers and increase yield. Okay, I'm gonna just skip all this because another thing, we're doing a trial to evaluate wheat for managing nematodes. And wheat is an excellent choice for reducing soybean cyst nematode. Very effective. Okay, I'm not going to go into all the details. And then I have several trials with beet cyst nematode. And I want to show you that we did trials with the compost and manures, and we got the same result with beet cyst nematode. So the high carbon counters, such as a compost, really increase hatching beyond zinc chloride. Zinc chloride is a special chemical to help nematodes to hatch. And the poultry manure really and swine manure killed nematode. It reduced the number of eggs. So very consistent. So this works. This works with chicken manure, for soybean cyst nematode, beet cyst nematode, and I suspect it worked with most nematodes. Okay, so with sugar beet cyst nematode, we tested different oilseed radishes. almost all oilseed radishes that we evaluated are trap crops and they reduce beet cyst nematode numbers compared to susceptible sugar beet. Okay, we tested different sugar beet varieties, um, and um, and different cover crops, and you can see that not all sugar beet varieties are the same. Some are better hosts than others. So you can see that some sugar beet varieties are better hosts or more resistant to soybean cyst nematode than others. We have several trials and microplots. You can see these are our microplots, little like containers, little pots where we do our trials. We love it. My technician Lance has done 99% of the work here, and he's done an amazing job. And it really helps us to do trials that have lower variability and get significant differences. And we're doing several trials with different oilseed radishes, and for sugar beets and for soybeans, etc. And I want to thank my lab team, especially Lance, that he's a workhorse. He's been a blessing to me. Ned Berkey, Mark Sylvester, Michigan Soybean Committee, Michigan Wheat Program, Project Green, Michigan Sugar Company, and USDA NIFA, all of them for providing funding in our trials. And that's it. Thank you very much for inviting me, Phil, and all the rest of the team. And I'll mute myself.
Well, thank you for attending today. We're going to move into our question and answers. And now I know some of the questions were answered in the chat box, but we're going to go ahead and read those and we're going to answer them live for our people that are listening on their phones so they can get the answers and they might have some of the same questions. So as we're going through here, please remember you can put more questions in the chat box and we will get to them. The first question, Marisol, comes from Eric. He wants to know what commercial nematicides have we lost? Is there any still available? And are there any new products in the pipeline?
Okay, so there are several in the pipeline, and there are also several available. Some are biological, some are chemical. Um, um, there are many options, and I put a website, the scncoalition.com. There's a graph of different um, diff, uh, different nematicides. I do want to say, because the seed treatment is not very much just a little product on the top of the seed, it is too much to ask for any product to resolve nematodes with a little bit of powder around the seed when you have almost an infinite amount of soil volume on the right, on the left, and below, okay? So none of these products can resolve soybean cyst nematode problem. It's not that they're bad products, it's just that it's not enough, you know? And not, I'm not saying they're all good, but it's too much to ask of any product. So some of them can help, but the most important way to manage soybean cyst nematode is rotate with non-host and rotate sources of resistance.
Right. Thank you. Mark is asking, could lower rates of compost or manure be applied with or near the soybean seed at planting to control early soybean cyst nematode infestation? Seems like this could be similar to the effects of SCN seed treatments.
Yeah, we have tested this, we applied at planting or before planting, and it does reduce soybean cyst nematode, and we tested in other crops and it does reduce other nematodes. So yes, some of these compost and manures can be effective in reducing nematodes. Again, you know, if you apply a common amount is like 1.25 tons or 1 ton per acre or 2 tons per acre, it's not going to eliminate all the nematodes, you know. Of course, if you applied a huge amount, it would eliminate a lot of the nematodes, but then you'll have phytotoxicity against your crops too, and you'll have some negative environmental impact. We have found that certain compost and manure, especially chicken manure and layer ash blend, that with a combination of 95% soil, 5% of this manures, you get 100% reduction of these nematodes. But that would mean like, I don't know, like 10 tons per acre, you're not going to apply that, it's too much. So what the point is that you're not going to get 100% control, and you're going to get a smaller reduction, and the nematode will still be there. There's no way to totally eliminate these nematodes, but we can manage and still get good yields with things like rotating sources of resistance, using non-host, rotation with non-host, compost, manures, certain nematodes. We can still have good yields despite them being there.
Thank you. Along that same topic, do specific cover crops reduce SCN more than others?
Yes, yes, but not as clearly as I would like. Um, I think most cover crops work for SCN as non-host. So most cover crops that people use are good options as non-host. We have not found the cover crop that is a trap crop, or like for sugar beet cyst nematode, that oilseed radishes work so amazingly to reduce the number of being a trap crop. We have not found something like that yet, but most cover crops are good alternatives and reduce soybean cyst nematode.
Okay. What are the most common weed species that are alternate hosts for SCN? Mitch is asking.
Um, okay, so some like purple dead nettle and henbit are one example of a pretty good host of soybean cyst nematode. Unfortunately, there are some weeds that are hosts or soybean cyst nematode. So controlling weeds can really help. And if you plant a cover crop like rye or something that grows through the fall and winter, can also help to reduce soybean cyst nematode, in part by limiting, the certain weeds that could be good hosts. That's another way that they work.
Thank you. Tasha would like to know if there are any studies and data results available from MSU on nematodes and other insects growing techniques available for farmers to access.
Yeah, I just spoke today. I showed several trials that we have. We have published several papers on the topic. Um, and like I said, we have many publications, but I think the most comprehensive website, and we have been involved in this, we are partners of the SCN Coalition, and it has so much information, so many trials from many states, is the SCN Coalition is, and it's www.thescncoalition.com. It has all kinds of information of management practices, and I will recommend going there to find answers about this.
And on that same note, the next question is coming. Can we apply the same strategy using resistant varieties and applying proper organic matter, in this case, poultry manure, etc., to reduce and hopefully eradicate nematode infestation in potatoes?
Okay, the answer to that is hard. For potatoes, there's a potato nematode called potato cyst nematode. That potato is very terrible, is very severe. Fortunately, we do not have it in Michigan. For that case, there are potatoes that are more resistant than others. Okay, and there are we could say there's similar things for that we could do to soybean cyst nematode. Fortunately, we do not have that nematode in Michigan. The most serious nematode in Michigan for potatoes is root lesion nematode. For root lesion nematode, there is no resistant variety. So you can't rotate different potato varieties to manage nematodes in Michigan. That's not possible. But all the other strategies do exist, and they are effective. We have several trials with compost and manures. They can be very effective. There are nematicides and fumigants that work pretty well for potatoes, In part for potatoes, you use much larger quantity. You're using drench, you're applying it in furrow application or fumigant that can have a pretty significant reduction on nematodes. And there are products that work better than others. And so there are methods you can use. Um, there are, again, cover crops that work for root lesion. For root lesion nematodes, certain oilseed radishes work pretty well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Jeff, there is one comment from Mark. Mark and the soybean growers would like to thank you for the rain. Um, and it's appreciated. And
Well, it's
we know you did it.
I'll certainly take, and especially if it does come as expected, but hopefully we will get a nice little drink here coming up over the next couple days.
Okay.
Thanks.
And Marisol, Phil has a question about sugar beets. At one time we used an oilseed radish variety, Defender. We were told that that was an effective treatment for sugar beet cyst nematode. Is that still the case?
Okay, so the answer is yes and no. There's several varieties that are just as effective or even more, not only to reduce beet cyst nematode, but to reduce root lesion nematode, root knot nematodes. They're pretty severe pests in several ornamental plants and many crops, carrots, etc. So there's varieties such as control, so oilseed radish variety control, oilseed radish variety Concord. Or I think in my presentation I had the name. I had the names of all of them. So anybody has a specific question that they can send me an email and I can send them that graph with the different varieties, which is like 20 of them. Okay. So most oilseed radish varieties that we tested are effective to reduce beet cyst nematode, root lesion nematode, root knot nematode. Unfortunately for soybean cyst nematode, they're just acting like a non-host. So there's not a big difference between this and other cover crops. But for certain nematodes, such as beet cyst nematode, root knot nematode, and root lesion nematode, these oilseed radishes varieties are just fantastic. They are really reducing the numbers. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. If there's not any more questions, Phil, I think we could probably end it for the day.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. We'll see you next week. Please come back and we will talk about Lyme with Dr. Stunky. Thank you for coming.